Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. The Toronto District School Board held a special meeting tonight to address concerns surrounding a field trip last week that saw students from over a dozen schools attend a planned protest. It was in support of Grassy Narrows First Nation to pressure the government to address mercury contamination in the Indigenous community. But videos circulating online showed pro-Palestinian slogans being shouted. Dale Manukduk joins us from outside TDSB headquarters. And Dale, tell us what happened at the meeting tonight.
Yeah, Kelda, several TDSB trustees spoke about student safety and about restoring trust in the board after this field trip, which has caused so much backlash that even the Ministry of Education has launched an investigation into what happened. Well, tonight, the TDSB board passed a motion unanimously requesting that the province wrap up its investigation by December 1st. Parents of some TDSB students are calling on teachers responsible for a field trip to a recent protest to be fired. Students and teachers from 15 TDSB schools attended a Grassy Narrows protest last week to educate students about the water crisis affecting Northwestern Ontario's Indigenous community. But some parents and advocates say pro-Palestinian chants at the protest made the field trip inappropriate for children.
And the teachers who are responsible are still in the classroom. So what is the TDSB waiting for?
A special meeting was held at TDSB headquarters meant to address the concerns.
Some of the concerns related to students who may have witnessed or participated in protest conduct. We also heard concerns that the events as reported were not aligned to permission forms described in the excursion.
CBC Toronto obtained emails from parents addressed to TDSB staff days before the field trip. The names are blacked out due to privacy concerns. One reads, "We strongly believe that politics should not be part of the classroom environment. This is a political rally which is by nature unpredictable and can easily turn violent." All of this will be part of a Ministry of Education investigation. The TDSB launched its own internal one a day after the river run, but are suspending it in light of the province's investigation.
It makes sense for us to not be interviewing the same people, collecting information and so on. So until we get the province to clarify what they want our role to be, we would like to wait to see that. So the province hasn't given us the detail of what the scope of their investigation is going to be.
What is clear is Premier Ford's position, who addressed the situation on Monday.
I think it's disgraceful. You're trying to indoctrinate our kids. They should be in the classroom learning about reading, writing, spelling, arithmetic, the whole shebang. But instead, the TDSB and these teachers want to bring them down to a rally, a Palestinian rally, and it's ridiculous.
Several students who attended the rally say the Premier is wrong and that the focus was on clean water in Grassy Narrows. In a joint letter, students from Bloor Collegiate Institute's Social Justice and Equity class wrote, in part, "We agree that the form should have been more clear about the students' option to choose their level of participation in order for parents to be able to give their full informed consent. However, a failure on behalf of the permission forms does not validate the level of misinformation being spread by Premier Doug Ford." Now, Kelda, those students from Bloor Collegiate Institute say that the River Run aligns with their class's curriculum goals of understanding social justice issues and civic engagement. They reiterate several times that what they attended was about the water contamination for Grassy Narrows First Nations and are pushing it back against any claims that it was an anti-Israel rally. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Dale, thank you so much for that. The Premier has a new ambitious plan to fight congestion, building a tunnel underneath Highway 401 stretching from Brampton all the way to Scarborough. It is Doug Ford's latest attempt to appeal to drivers, but opposition parties aren't convinced the proposal is even serious. Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop has those details.
Highway 401 in Toronto is known as the busiest highway in North America. Today, the Premier announced a plan to try to relieve some of that congestion, build a tunnel underneath it for vehicles and transit.
It will be one of the world's longest tunnels, one of them.
He says it could run all the way from Brampton to Scarborough. The Premier sounds committed, even though this is just the start of a feasibility study.
I'll tell you one thing, we're getting this tunnel built. The reason we're having a feasibility study, it's going to determine the length. If they're telling me 30 kilometers is X, 40 kilometers is Y, and 70 or 60 kilometers is another cost, Let's take a look at it.
The government has still provided no cost estimates for another highway project, Highway 413. It comes as gridlock has worsened, and the government says its data shows all 400 series highways will be at or above capacity in 10 years.
This is a fantasy tunnel when we need real solid solutions. Has he thought about this for more than 5 minutes? We are looking at years of traffic chaos, disruption, billions of taxpayer dollars.
If you have a pricing at hundreds of billions of dollars to build a pipe dream fairy tale tunnel under the 401, how could that money could have been better spent?
The Premier says bold ideas are needed. Years ago, as city councillor, he also came up with a plan that surprised many. For a monorail connecting the downtown waterfront and a giant Ferris wheel.
Remember, this is very preliminary, very premature, but I'm gonna give you the vision.
In the end, those ideas never happened. Ford promises he's serious about this plan.
Wouldn't it be great, you know, if we had tunnels going both sides in the middle where we have transit? It'd be spectacular.
The Toronto Region Board of Trade called this exactly the type of visionary thinking that governments should pursue. This was day 3 in a row for the Premier in front of the cameras as he's mulling a potential early re-election bid. Asked if it'll happen next year, a year ahead of schedule, he laughed and said maybe, after an announcement that felt like a way to win over drivers. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Ford's plan is also being met with skepticism at City Hall, while experts warn construction would take years and cost billions. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has more on that.
I'll tell you one thing, we're getting this tunnel built.
Premier Doug Ford on the need to build the tunnel expressway under the 401, all to relieve congestion on the busy highway. It's the kind of project that evokes images of the Big Dig, the mega project that rerouted a major highway in Boston. That project came in years late and billions over budget. And that's where Councillor Diane Sachs's mind went when she heard the Premier's plan.
The Premier never runs out of ideas for spending billions and billions of dollars of public money making traffic worse. I mean, there is lots of research that expanding highway space increases traffic. That's what happened in the Big Dig after $21 billion worth of work.
Ontario's former environmental commissioner is skeptical the project will ever happen.
I am somewhat optimistic that the enormous engineering and financial challenges will shut it down.
Councillor Josh Matlow is frustrated by the proposal. He says the Premier should spend the money on transit instead.
I mean, this guy is just distracting us with these harebrained ideas when there are real priorities that are not being funded or met.
U of T geography professor Maddie Simiatiki says the province deserves credit for its ambitious transit expansion work. But this project may not accomplish what it hopes.
There's no evidence that this will work, it likely is constructible, it will be hugely expensive, and it will not solve our congestion problems. In fact, it will make them worse.
One of the keys to cutting congestion on the 401 is reducing demand, he says. And Ford has already ruled out one solution: road tolls.
That conversation is completely off limits right across the political spectrum. It's not just the Conservative, right across the political spectrums. That is, you self-combust when you make that comment.
But this expert says there's merit in exploring the tunnel idea. Expanding transport infrastructure to accommodate growth makes sense to him.
This could be the reality that we are looking for and leverage this tunneling project, not just for cars, but also for public transit.
Hayter says the project will cost billions per kilometre and cost escalation will be a reality.
If somebody says it's too expensive and it's going to take too long, my first question is give me a cheaper, faster alternative and I'll be on their side.
The province says its study will look at a number of options to increase the 401's capacity, and it will examine how similar projects were completed in other jurisdictions. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
We have a correction to make tonight about a story we brought to you last night. We reported that members of the TTC board voted to continue offering free Wi-Fi in its subway stations, when in fact the TTC will still end the program at the end of the year as planned. The TTC board voted Tuesday to continue with its plan to end free public Wi-Fi at subway stations, but did agree to study the possibility of putting internet zones into bus bays in the future. The transit agency announced this month it would cancel cancel the service, saying its use was scarce and had reliability and security concerns, adding that it would cost more than $17 million to upgrade its infrastructure. We apologize for the mistake. Toronto police are appealing to the public for help in identifying a suspect wanted in a stabbing that left one man with life-threatening injuries. Now, police releasing this security video of the suspect taken moments before the incident on Bloor Street West and Christie Street. It happened shortly before 1 in the morning on Tuesday. Police say an argument broke out between the man seen walking here and a group of people. The fight escalated and the suspect allegedly stabbed several people before fleeing the area. A 24-year-old man was critically injured in the attack. A 22-year-old man suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The assault trial of an off-duty Toronto police officer continued today in a Brampton courtroom. Calvin Au is accused of assault causing bodily harm in a Kijiji deal gone wrong, in which his friend fellow off-duty officer was sold a fake Apple Watch. Today, he was questioned about what happened that day. Ali Chiasson reports.
Calvin Au and another off-duty officer who was with him told the court what they remember from a physical altercation with Chad Facey. Constable Gurmak Benning was asked about how Facey fell when he was taken down. Defense lawyer Peter Browdy asks, "You say he fell on his back, slightly to one side?" Benning answers, "Yes. When he fell, you didn't hear him scream in pain?" "No. He simply went down to the ground." Benning answers, "Yes." Calvin Au was asked whether he struck Facey during the takedown. "No, there were never any strikes, punches, kicks, elbows, or knees." Defense lawyer Peter Browdy asks, "How about from Mr. Facey?" Calvin Au answers, "None." What the defense is arguing here is that the injuries Chad Facey had, like the hematoma in the middle of his forehead, could not have happened in this altercation as described by these two cops. Au was asked to demonstrate how he grabbed Facey in taking him down. He was also asked to demonstrate how Facey's friend allegedly ran over to them, making a gesture that Au described made it look like he had a weapon, which he took as a threat. When it came time for the Crown Attorney's cross-examination of Au, they pointed out the size difference between them. While Au was shorter than Facey, he outweighed him by 55 pounds. Calvin Au's testimony about his use of force continues tomorrow. He has pleaded not guilty to one count of assault causing bodily harm. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Brampton.
There is new testimony tonight from the woman who says she was raped by former Headley frontman Jacob Hogard, including explicit details of what she alleges happened in a Northern Ontario motel room in 2016. Thomas Dagla has more on what the jury heard.
In the early hours of June 25th, 2016, a woman says she was led down a motel hallway, following Jacob Hogard into his room for what she says she expected would be a casual chat. Now in court, the complainant spent the day testifying about what happened next, sometimes fighting back tears, always avoiding eye contact with her alleged attacker watching on. "He bent me over the bed," she recounted. "He pulled his pants down," later testifying that he raped her. "I didn't consent to that," she said. At Hogard's trial in northeastern Ontario, the issue of consent is key. The 40-year-old former Headley frontman is charged with one count of sexual assault, which he denies.
It's not for the defense to prove that it was consensual, it's for the Crown to prove that it wasn't. So that's going to be the burden on the Crown.
The woman, who can't be named, was 19 when she says she attended this Headley concert, meeting the singer later at an outdoor after-party behind the motel. She told court he held up his phone, took pictures of her, and demanded she say her age out loud. Later, on the bed, she says Hogard choked her, imitated pig sounds, and called the woman dirty little piggy. She testified that when she took a shower after the assault, he followed her and urinated on her. The woman recounted once it was all over, "He says that I don't have to worry about STDs or AIDS because he picks them young." Hogard's defense lawyer Megan Savard began her cross-examination by focusing on the limits of the complainant's memory. The lawyer suggested to her memory fades over time, but the woman said she only wishes she could forget what happened to her that day. Hogard's trial continues on Thursday. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. The Liberals survived a vote in the House of Commons today that threatened to bring down the federal government.
Move that the House has no confidence in the Prime Minister and in the government.
Members of Parliament voted on a non-confidence motion introduced by the Conservatives. As expected, Bloc Québécois, NDP, and Liberal members voted against. So the motion failed, 211 to 120. But it's one of a series of confidence votes the Liberals could face. The Bloc today said it will pull the party's support if Liberals fail to meet two of its demands by the end of October. The rebuilding of a Toronto community housing property is a step closer to reality, more than 2 years after it was evacuated for safety reasons. An initial development plan of the Swansea Mews complex with hundreds of additional units was presented to TCH. Now, if approved, it will head to City Council next. But as Tyler Cheese tells us, some former residents say they're still recovering from the sudden displacement they experienced 2 years ago.
You know, that's where all my memories are. You know, I feel like any person who has a home could sympathize with the idea of having to lose it, right?
Jardel Saleh Ferreira grew up at Swansea Mews. He and his family are some of the residents who were forced to leave their homes after a ceiling in the Toronto community housing complex collapsed, injuring a woman in May 2022.
There was a lot of people looking out for each other there. Like my next door neighbors, we'd always share food. We'd always, you know, share birthdays, spend time together and stuff like that. So there was a sense of community.
Now he lives with his mother and two younger brothers in this other housing complex in Scarborough.
It's hard to, I don't exactly feel safe and comfortable here yet.
After the evacuation, residents were told they'll have the right to return when a new complex is built. Now, a new TCH report outlining a plan to rebuild Swansea Mews is promising news.
There will be what's called an initial development plan that will go to the Toronto Community Housing Board and then come to council, which sets out the broad parameters for what they want to build there. Then we'll start in on a rezoning and get a new building put there.
The initial development plan proposes a new, much larger complex that would replace the existing 154 public housing units and add 550 to 700 new units, though it's not clear if these would also be public housing units. But even if this plan is approved, it'll still be years before a new complex is built and residents have the option to move back in.
There was a funding agreement with the federal government about this building for repair and reconstruction. Because we then found out that the building was unsafe to live in, it's now a tear down. And that's a different funding envelope, so we have to go back and reapply.
In a statement to CBC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says it's committed to working with TCH to achieve positive housing solutions through the National Housing Strategy. And while all that's going on, Saleh Ferreira says he'll work on convincing his family to move back to the neighborhood he remembers fondly.
They like this place a lot better. And yeah, I just don't see it happening. But, I mean, we'll see if I can change their minds.
Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
Tropical storm Helene has become a hurricane, and it could hit the southern United States by tomorrow. It's now crossing the Gulf of Mexico after battering Cancun. It was still a tropical storm when it hit Mexico, but it's gaining strength as it crosses the Gulf. Torrential rains are expected to further erode Cancun's beaches. And in the southern U.S., sandbagging is underway, with emergencies declared in both Florida and Georgia. Authorities are predicting life-threatening storm surge along the entire west coast of Florida. All right, Colette Kennedy joining us now with a look at the forecast. And Colette, today started a bit gray and gloomy, but we did see the clouds lift a little bit as the day went on.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, we're looking at a couple of nice days ahead, so something that we can really enjoy. I'll go into more detail on that coming up, but I do have to bring your attention to the latest on Hurricane Helene and the wind speeds over 135 kilometers an hour at this time, talking about a Category 1. But to use the National Hurricane Center in the U.S., their own language, they are talking about this being catastrophic and deadly in terms of the storm surge, and one one of the reasons is that it is anticipated now at the latest forecast run that it is going to be not just a major hurricane, Cat 3, but into the Cat 4 category, wind speeds of 215 kilometers an hour. So obviously devastating for the Florida coastline and the state of Florida, but into the southeastern U.S. And then eventually it brings itself up by Saturday here as it continues to weaken, but right around towards Tennessee. And that's when we'll be seeing some of the outer bands of this in terms of the cloud cover and maybe a few light showers. Nothing like they'll be seeing when we're talking about some of these wind speeds over 95 kilometers an hour, certainly possible by Cedar Key and Horseshoe Beach and through this region, even over 80 at St. Petersburg. But again, it is that storm surge where some of the areas they're talking about the storm surge. It's that wall of water that comes in, and this is very low terrain. I have friends who've already been evacuated, their whole family here from Tampa Bay area, but very low terrain. So in some of these areas here in pink, over 12 feet or 3.5 meters. But again, the National Hurricane Center is saying there are areas where it may be over 20 feet, a wall of water 20 feet high or 6 meters, if you can imagine. So flash flooding, coastal flooding, devastating in that area, and hopefully not, but quite likely could be deadly. As the trough, though, in the jet stream digs down in here and pulls this cold front that's been moving through our region and that we've experienced some of the wet weather associated with, we're all tied together from the southeastern U.S. here all the way into Ontario. We got into some clearing and allowed the daytime highs today. Toronto popping up to 24. That clearing looks good for Thursday, and then it is into Friday. This is some high thin cloud at first. That's some of those upper bands, the outer bands of what will at that time be the remnants of Hurricane Helene, as that landfall is coming tomorrow night, and then some light showers will become possible as well. Your overnight temperatures for tonight, 14 to 16 degrees around the GTA. Then tomorrow with the sun, enjoy it. 23 degrees will be our daytime high, some increase in cloudiness. Then on Friday, 21. Saturday, clouds and likely some light showers. We'll keep it at that for now, but temperatures running above seasonal.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.